All right, it is June 2020, and there's been some Catholic drama, which is a lot like my YouTube channel. It can only be found by people who are directly looking for it. Um, but no, seriously, there's been some chatter conversation in the Catholic bubble that I want to talk about because it leads to an interesting conversation. There's a lot of boring drama that I want to slog through, and I want to drag you through first. But once we're through, I'll try and make it quick. Once we're through, I think it leads to an interesting conversation that's worth having. So right now we're in the wake of the sort of George Floyd Corona protests, and some of the protests have actually started targeting Catholic statues. And one of those statues was Junipero Serra. I think I pronounced that wrong, but I'm gonna roll with it. Um, and it's kind of ironic that that statue was targeted in particular because the dude literally walked from California to Mexico City with a bad leg to negotiate on behalf of the California natives. So I don't know how he becomes a symbol of racism that has to get torn down. Point being, point being, these rioters and these vandals are acting on emotion. They're not being reasonable, and let's say lay leaders in the Catholic world have pointed this out. And I'm thinking in particular about three people. I'm thinking about Taylor Marshall, Tim Gordon, and Michael Voris, and I'm going to put those guys as my thumbnail. The reason I'm singling those guys out is because they've just waded into the Catholic drama bubble. It's like a bubble within a bubble. There's the Catholic bubble, and then there's the Catholic drama bubble, and those guys are like in the bullseye of that. And it brings up an interesting conversation. So here's the boring story. Here's the drama. The boring story is go on YouTube, look up Taylor Marshall Bishop Barron, and you're going to find a video by Taylor Marshall which says Bishop Barron blocked me. Here's why. It's like a BuzzFeed thing, and he basically walks through how the statues are getting torn down, and he asked for, hey, bishops, especially Bishop Barron, because Bishop Barron's got a big word on fire platform. What's the bishop's response? Reasonable question. Bishop Barron says something along the lines of, which is weird. This reading this response really surprised me. Bishop Barron responded by saying that's it's the laity's job because the statues, something about the statues being public domain that the bishops shouldn't really worry about. That's the laity's job. And then Bishop Barron cited Vatican II as precedence, and so then um, Dr. Dr. Marshall asked in his follow-up tweet, "Well, what's the Vatican II document specifically about this thing?" And Bishop Barron apparently blocked him for that. And it's a I don't know, Twitter beef. Who cares? Boring story, a lot of minutia. I know. Something about statues, something about this guy getting blocked by Bishop Barron. Okay, you could look up Taylor Marshall Bishop Barron YouTube. You'll find it. The other guy, Tim Gordon, this guy was fired. He was a Catholic high school teacher, and he criticized Black Lives Matter on Twitter. He called it a terrorist organization. Then he got fired from a Catholic school, and he released a video. He also dragged Bishop Barron into this, and he said um, the video was an open letter to Bishop Barron, and you could also YouTube this. I think it's got like something like 50,000 views as we speak, as I speak to you, as I speak to the internet. Who am I speaking to? I don't know. Tim Gordon, open letter to Bishop Barron saying, "Hey, Bishop Barron, I did what you said. I spoke up. It's the laity's job to take this into our own hands, and I did, and I got fired. And he happens to have a kid who just had a brain surgery, so it's like he lost his health insurance, and it's like watching the video is hard because there's a lot of hurt on his end, and you could that comes out, and it's just a ride for this guy, and your heart goes out to him, and it's like, what's going on? Where on the one hand, yeah, where is the bishop's leadership? And he definitely shows that side of the coin. Um, and I guess the third guy you could look up is is the Vortex. And if you look up the Vortex Bishop Barron, I'm not kidding. One of the videos is just going to be a picture of Bishop Barron's face and the word coward on it. Like, so Bishop Barron's getting dragged into this whole statue conversation. And the reason is because I think he's the personification of the I think it was the California Conference, the Catholic California Conference. Forgetting the name. They wrote a letter and it basically said, "Hey, don't tear down this Junipero Serra statue. He was a good guy, um, but we stand by um, we stand by the anti-racist protests and we stand by all this." And it was a really weak response. Like objectively, there's anti-Catholic organizations. I think Black Lives Matter does, true or false, does Black Lives Matter have, you know, well, what was it? It was an attack on the nuclear family, but there was a word for deconstruct. I think it was like deconstruct the nuclear family. Like true or false, is that on the BLM website right now as one of their to-do lists? So there are organizations which are not Catholic, like they're anti-Catholic, and bishops aren't calling out the organization. They're maybe pussyfooting around it. Okay, that's the drama. Boring story. We got through it. You can go look up these videos if you want for the background details, information, whatever you want. The interesting conversation that I really want to have is 2 points. On the one hand, no one no one seems to be having the nuanced conversation of how should the church conduct itself both politically and in, let's say, one-on-one conversations with people outside the church. Like, don't just tell me proclaim the truth because that's not good enough. And like, if anyone says like, "Hey, I just say the truth," and you know, people can worry about my tone, and maybe my tone is off-putting, but is what I'm saying true? And it's like, facts don't care about your feelings. If someone just leaves it at that, I'm not dissing these guys. Like I'm not I think that was a Ben Shapiro quote. I'm not dissing Ben Shapiro. I'm saying if people just say, "Hey, it doesn't matter how I said it, it just matters that what I said was true." That's so obviously wrong. Like it's so obviously insane. Like that you can't leave it at that. And that's just obvious. And if anyone is saying that, it's fast food for the soul, all right? Anyone who's actually had a conversation with someone from the other side knows that there has to be trust, there has to be rapport. It How you say things does matter. You can't just like barf out a true statement and then scratch that onto the pavement. And it's like, well, that's a true statement, right? It doesn't matter how it came out. It's like, give me a break. All right. Again, I'm not accusing these guys of that. I'm saying there there's a failure to tell people how to do things. Like you can bash someone all you want for their weakness and for how they should have done something. And I'll even go so far as to say is this is a time to be saying that. Like this is a time for questioning the character of bishops. Like this is a really tumultuous situation that we're in. And this is a situation that requires genuine leadership, and we need good leaders, and we need leaders with character. And so we should be talking like there is a time and a place to talk about the character of our leaders. And I think this is one of them. Like that's fair. Like I'm granting these guys all of that. What I want to see more of is how do we actually conduct conversations? Like when one of the criticisms that Bishop Barron got was, he was on Ben Shapiro, and I think Ben Shapiro asked him, "Can non-Catholics be saved?" And Bishop Barron got really philosophical, and he tried to find all the loopholes to say yes. Like, yeah, you don't have to believe in the Catholic Church to get saved. And he's trying to find the Catholic loophole to just say that statement, and it came off as tootsieing around the issue. And I think another one that Bishop Barron got was on the Dave Rubin report, because Dave Rubin's the political commentator in a married to a dude, and so I think he got criticism for just being soft on that guy. And it's like the question I have is what do you expect Bishop Barron to say, and how do you expect him to say it? And those are two separate questions. I mean, I think you can articulate the truth, or articulate your perception of the truth, or just articulate however you want to say, articulate the Catholic point of view. You can articulate that, but it's like, how do you actually expect the guy to get invited to Dave Rubin's podcast in his own house and have a conversation about his whole conception of his marriage is off base? Like, how, how do how do you do that? How do you have that conversation? Like, tell me. Like, I'm actually curious. Don't just. It's not good enough to bash the guy, to bash Bishop Barron about how he did it. I also want to see how do you expect people, how do you expect Catholics to behave in that situation? What do you expect them to say, and how do you expect them to say it? Like, I want to see that level of detail. And this sounds impossible. This sounds like, hey, how do I actually, what are the rules for conducting conversations? Like, what are the rules for socializing? Like, that sounds impossible, but like, if you've actually had conversations with non-religious people, like, I can come up with something right now, right off the top of my head. So I was a Catholic student in a tech school where I was surrounded basically by agnostic friends. And I was in college when gay marriage got legalized, and I was, the only Catholic in some of my friend circles. And so I had lots of conversations with atheists and secular people and agnostics, however they describe. It's all the same, but don't tell them I said that. Um, however, where am I? I've had a lot of conversations with secular people, and here's the advice I would give. I would say, first of all, yes, make it about the truth. That's step one. Let's say that like, when it comes to any particular issue, whether it's gay marriage, abortion, the existence of God, let's let's try and frame the whole conversation so that philosophy and truth and reason and evidence, they all let's try and bring those to bear. And yeah, I need to come off as the kind of person who's going to listen to evidence and who's going to pay attention to reason. Like, you want to convey that as you're building your rapport with this person. And so that's the first step, which is, yeah, yes, make it about the truth. I think what I would give as a second step, if you're in a one-on-one conversation with a secular person who doesn't believe what you do, and I would say the same for politics, which is genuinely ask questions about how they came to believe what they believe. Like, I was talking with someone recently about, and they said, I don't. This is a young woman who said, I don't think I want to ever have kids. And that was, I want to have kids, so I don't know. That I can't relate to that. And so instead of um, going off about how the philosophy of childbearing and natural law, or I don't know, something about that. What I said was, look, what's going on when you say that? Like, what's going on a second through your head? Like, we were in the middle of a philosophical conversation, so this isn't as cringy as I'm about to make it. But like, what was going through your head a second before you said that? Like, what was going through your head when you said that? And what do you think were your life experiences that led up to saying that? We were in the middle of a deep conversation, so I was able to just kind of say it pretty much like that. Lucky me. And she was talking about, oh, that's a good question. I don't know, like, let's figure this out. Well, I was part of a Reddit group that was trashing babies, and it was like, oh, that's interesting, about how, single, just being single, or not single, but having no kids is just obviously better for women, and how kids are gremlins and stuff. And she was in one of these Reddit groups, and it was weird. And she said she didn't really buy into that, but it was something she brought it up. And it's like, that's good. We're talking about these experiences, and we're talking about, like, how do you actually form these ideas, and are they based off good reasons? Are they based off emotions? And are those good emotions, or is it a moment of weakness? Like, we can start to really unpack this. And it, we can't get to that point if I just barf out what I think the truth is. We just don't get there. And so, bringing this back to our whole discussion about Bishop Barron and the statues, it's like, what do you want the bishops to say. Like, and not only that, it's not that hard, at least from my experience, when you're dealing with one-on-one interactions, it's not that hard to actually lay out some ground rules for how to positively conduct yourself. It's not like not just a negative, right? Or you just say, hey, someone did something bad and that's negative. I'm going to throw a dart at it and try and pop their bubble. No, no, no. Like positively, what do I do? It's like I can come up with that. It's establish a rapport, or it's about the truth. It's ask questions about how they formed what where do they, why do they believe what they believe, and then it's once they do that, they're open to listening about how do you form the beliefs you have to believe, and that's a perfect opportunity to say to let them articulate the desires of their heart, and then to let your Catholic faith just come through and not only fulfill the desires of their heart, but just like blow it out of the water. Like I've had moments like that where I was talking to another secular friend about finding purpose in life, and we had just watched the Stephen Hawking movie together about how he was a secular person who was trying to find meaning in the universe, and we had this 3 hour conversation after about finding purpose in life, and so I let him articulate his whole thought process on purpose. And so he was talking about how, his idea of purpose was accomplishing something, was leaving a mark on society in a good way. And there was a crisis of purpose because what if he doesn't accomplish that? Right? Well, then his life was purposeless. Uh-oh, that's a problem. Well, what if he does accomplish it and then it's meaningless? Uh-oh, there's another problem, right? So it's this crisis of purpose where I'm damned if I do, damned if I don't. And I said, and I was able to say to, after hearing that in this 3 hour conversation, I was able to say to him, look, like my Catholic faith taught me to not hinge my purpose on something material like that. It's like it's about my relationship with God, it's about my pursuit of goodness and my spirituality and my relationship with others. And I'm able to actually stake my purpose on that, and it's not like I'm not faking this. Like this is genuinely where I'm at, and that's why I don't feel the way you do about this. And so, long story short, the conversation ended with him asking, well, how do I get baptized? And it was kind of rhetorical, kind of in the moment. He didn't do that, but I think the point being it was a good conversation. It was following a simple rubric of establish a rapport of yeah, it's about honest conversation about the truth. B, let them articulate the desires of their heart, and then C, let your Catholic faith, or if you genuinely do have something to offer it, and it's kind of salesman-y, but it does work. Like that's the advice I would give, and that's the positive thing I would tell people to do in a one-on-one conversation. And then I don't see people saying this. Like, this isn't a hard thing for me to articulate. I can do this off the top of my head. Like, I've just had a lot of conversations with secular people, and I can just articulate this advice off the top of my head. And I don't see other people doing this. And like other leaders in the church, like people like these guys who have tens of thousands of followers, who they're not having the conversation at this level of nuance. And I it bothers me. So I'm saying something. Me and my 10 followers are gonna, I don't know, storm some gates of some, I don't know, something. um, so the first point is we need to have a more nuanced discussion about how does the church positively conduct itself politically and individually. I talked about individual a little bit. Politically, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm 24, so table that. So that's the first interesting conversation to have about the boring conversation about drama. So the second interesting conversation, I think, is who are the leaders of the church and how do we get them to do leader things? And here's what I mean. From my experience, just work, I don't work in the church. I work at an engineering company, and here's what I'm hearing about leadership. Leadership is really about putting the right brains on the right problems effectively. And so what I want the church to do, what I want the church leadership to do specifically is to be able to put the right brains on the right problems. So let me distinguish for a second between church, lay leadership, and the clergy. The clergy is a pretty well established leadership. We know who to listen to. The lay leadership, we don't know who it is. We kind of do, but we don't know what their role is in the church, right? And so what I mean by lay leadership, like these guys that I just name dropped, Taylor Marshall, Tim Gordon, you could talk about Matt Fradd, Word on Fire. You could talk about Mark Hart, the Bible Geek. Any number of these guys who have tens of thousands of followers, if not hundreds of thousands. These guys are lay leaders, and what they say matters. And not only that, but how they say it does matter. And you could see this in the YouTube comment sections. That's another experiment you could run. My science brain loves experiments. Just go on a YouTube channel and scroll through the comments. You could actually see a difference, but table that. Point being, there are lay leaders in the church. Like there are people with a big voice who have tens of thousands of people listening into them. And my question is, how do we use that leadership to put the right brains on the right problems? So if you just want to criticize Bishop Barron, that's not good enough. What I need is, what is Bishop Barron good at, and how do we get him to do those good things into for the productive use of the church? Does that make sense? If what he's good at is winning Emmy awards for his Catholicism series and presenting the church in a smart and, let's say, attractive way to, the scientific secular world, which I think there's a case for that. Let's How do we get him to do that? And if we think he's weak on the politics side, if we think he tiptoes around issues to the harm of everyone, then how do we steer him towards the problems his brain is good at solving? Like, that's what good leadership does. And I'm not saying, I'm kind of picking on Bishop Barron here, but like I'm kind of talking as if we got to manage this guy. Again, I'm 24. I have 10 subscribers. Don't listen to my advice about this particular guy. But what I'm trying to talk about is, there's not just clerical leadership, but there's lay leadership, and the lay leadership doesn't seem to be putting the right brains on the right problems. The lay leadership seems to be a commentariat, which throws darts a lot of the times. And what I would like to see more of is, again, constructive structural change that actually puts the right people on the problems that they're very good at solving. Um, So that's all I got. Those are the two conversations. Number one, I want to see more nuanced discussions from our lay leadership about how do we actually conduct ourselves as a church politically and as individuals. And then number two, um, how do we let's like think creatively. Like these are all smart guys. I'm not bashing them at all. Like all the guys that I name dropped here, very intelligent, smarter than me, more subscribers than me. But what I want to see us doing is putting the right brains on the problems that those brains are specialized to solve. So that's all I got. Thanks for tuning in.